Hello, everybody. Welcome to Proc-N-Roll, your guide to practical procurement, where we make procurement rock and roll. Today with us, of course, you have Natasha, the pro CPO, experience at IBM, McKesson, Salesforce, and most recently at Nike. She brings 25 years of experience. I'm Conrad, the innovator from Intel, Adobe, and now founder of Graphite, one of the hottest procurement startups out there today. Unfortunately, we're missing Zach with us, our buddy from KPMG in London. We'll pick him up next time. Together, we bring you almost 70 years of practical procurement experience. And here on Proc-N-Roll, we discuss the latest and greatest trends and topics in procurement, the most important things that we're all thinking about every day. And today is no exception. Today, Natasha has invited two very special guests, Elisa and Anna. They are legal pros, and all of you that have worked in procurement know that legal and procurement work hand in hand to deliver services to the organization. So we're really happy to have you here. Natasha, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about our special guests?
Absolutely. We'll be happy to, and very, very honored to welcome my colleagues, my friends, and my partners over the many, many years. I'll start with the longest tenure of acquaintance, and that is Elisa Harvey. We worked together starting in 2005 at eBay and PayPal, and we had an amazing journey together, which the fact that we're staying together 20 years later just is another exclamation to how close the partnership was. And it will come through our conversation what we have gone through. Elisa's career is very similar to mine. We both started as pre-junior 30 years ago and finished as chiefs in our areas. Elisa's last two corporate jobs were chief legal officer at Gusto and HubSpot. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And it is a testament. Yeah. And you knew me when I was just Harvey. I added Dawson over the years.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I met Mr. Dawson. So it was on my watch. So yes, Harvey Dawson. And Anna Erickson is former procurement professional who now switched to legal side. So if Elisa had always been on the legal side, partnering closely with procurement, Anna used to be on procurement side. Our first tour of duty together was at IBM and then at McKesson and then a little bit at Salesforce. And then at McKesson, when we were working together and Anna was handling the toughest areas of corporate and professional services and partnering with legal, she made a decision to go to law school, which she successfully graduated, passed the bar from the first attempt, and she has been practicing law since then. And she now founded Erickson Law Group, where she will be specializing on intellectual property. So,
you guys work together through all those different companies. You must have enjoyed working together for that to continue.
We did. She just kept asking me to come back. So I don't know how that happened, but so glad that it did and super excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. And so I kept asking you to come back, and the good testament that you kept coming back. So there was some magic that we built together. So if you, dear listeners and viewers, remember our last episode on the contracts, after we finished the conversation, we realized that we raised very critical points of partnership between legal and procurement, the importance of it, how technology is invading, in a good sense of this word, the world of procurement and legal, and how AI is significantly simplifying in some areas what lies ahead of both organizations, but on another hand, creates some obstacles of certain nature. And we also talked about risk aspect of contracts. And we felt I mean, Conrad, Zach, and we felt that it was good for us to raise the subject, but we have so many unanswered questions that it would make sense for us to bring experts in the area. And of course, when I started thinking about who to invite, I went back to both of you because, again, in Anna's case, a wonderful representation of both procurement and legal knowledge from inside, and Elisa, from your deep and long experience working with procurement organizations. So those will be our three themes for the day. We'll talk about tech and AI in legal and procurement, then about building relationships between legal and procurement, because we all know that if those relationships work well, it's nirvana. If not, it's hell. And we'll talk about risk management from the perspective of resiliency and supplier management. Sounds like a good plan?
That sounds great.
Well, let's begin. Elisa, I would like to start with you sharing your perspective on technology aspect in legal. You've been in legal for 25, 30 years. We can skip the first probably 20. Let's focus on now and specifically going forward. What is your vision, especially because you're working at a HubSpot as your last corporate job, which is in the center of AI development?
Yeah, I've been working with tech companies for, decades. And in each one, there was always the challenge of how to move business forward faster, but also be smart about taking the risk. AI, the emerging technologies, just sort of blew that stuff out of the water. It just completely accelerated the entire equation, because there's this foundational and fundamental, exponential, I should say, technology that is going to disrupt everything. And every company is seeing it, and every company internally knows they need to do something differently because of its ability to process and understand and analyze more so than you had been able to before. And, we can get into will it replace humans? Will it not replace humans? I'll put that to the side for a second, because the important thing to know is it is going to change the way we work, right? And if you aren't on board with that, then you're way far behind, because you're not realizing the advantages, whether it's efficiency, whether it's proficiency, whether it's, resource replacements, whether it's operationally, you're missing out on all of the advantages that comes. And procurement and legal is no different, because what do? We process contracts, right? You send it to humans to look through, to review, to analyze, to compare, to contrast, then give feedback. There's a tool out there that can consolidate and condense that right now. You would want to use that because businesses are doing that to do business, right? They're not doing that for the fun of it. You're doing it if you're doing sales. You want that sale to close faster. You're doing that if you need, supplies internally or materials in order to make your products. You want that to be done faster, because the slower it is, the less productive you potentially are, and that impacts your profits. So from a business standpoint, you are looking for that efficiency and proficiency in that process. And so naturally, this technology is standing right there to do it. And unfortunately, realistically, people are concerned about it, right? They're like, how do I use it? Do I know enough? It's risky. Yes, it is, but that doesn't mean it can't be usable. I do a lot of responsible AI right now. So there are ways around it, but that's the cornerstone of what the problem is. And the solution is people just need to get on board and get smart about it, and then weave in all of those other things that you need to consider, like responsible use, bias, accuracy, to make it better. But that's what's going on right now.
Elisa, I've been saying for, a decade or two that Word is the killer app for legal. When I was at Adobe, the Acrobat team was trying to hey, how can we use, Acrobat to do legal redlining? And I'm like, you guys are wasting your time. Like, every attorney on the planet is redlining in Word, right? And and there's portals and there's CLM and there's all this other stuff. When you think about technology and AI coming into this process, because are you thinking that the killer app of Word is at risk of losing its footprint, or that Word itself is going to have like tools either bolted on or natively into it that bring all of this automation and speed that you're describing?
Yeah, I think that I think it could be, it could be both. If you're using Word and spoiler, in my last companies, I had to use Google. One was because I was at an alphabet company and everyone had to use Google Drive. And that was the first time as a lawyer where we were forced to use Google Docs for redlining, and they were not pleased. It's definitely harder. But putting that aside, think about the tools that you use. And you mentioned Word, right? It enables you to redline and to see things differently. You will want whatever tool you have to be seamlessly integrated into the world. It's going to make it easy to process. I think those tools should either try to figure out, once again, how to integrate or replicate what that's doing, so that people can easily adopt it at the end of the day. So I haven't been doing that killer app, but I have been talking to a lot of folks in legal tech. And at my companies, we were looking at different applications. I would say the harder ones to adopt were the ones where you had to sort of learn something new on top of the other thing, as opposed to integrating into the tools that people use, so that it speeds up the adoption and makes everything faster. How you return it to somebody else. There's other parties on the other side. And if everyone has to figure out the new thing and you're not using the same one, that's kind of a little chaotic. So it really needs to work seamlessly, in my opinion, with some of those tools, at least at the beginning, in order to get adoption.
So legal, by definition, would not be a pioneer of a technology, right? Just because legal function is more risk averse than other functions.
I think you can be. Look, if you step back, and I don't know, Conrad, maybe you didn't fully understand what I was saying, so I don't want to miss your follow-up question. Fundamentally, if you think about the job that you're doing, you should be looking for any tool out there that's going to enable you to do it better, cheaper, faster. So there's no reason why legal can't be a pioneer. Now, to your point, Natasha, groups are going to be thinking about, what's the risk? Do I really want to put my, proprietary document into some third-party tool that has the ability to understand, my sensitive business information in ways that I can't control? Like, there will be those concerns, but you can work through them. Knowing there's a concern and letting that stop you versus knowing there's a concern and being able to work through it and work around it. And that's kind of the way we work together. Like, I never let concerns like that stop me from moving forward when there's something that's so obviously better at the end of the day for productively, whatever that word is, to move you forward. So I think you are slow as a legal department, a law firm, if you're letting that stop you and waiting for somebody else to do it. And the ones that are going to be innovative are going to move forward and figure that out. And be willing to make some mistakes along the way. You can test, you can pilot, it doesn't have to be the whole apple cart. But you should not be saying, we're not going to do it, we'll see what happens, because you're already then years behind.
In our business, I'm in the middle of, I've been redlining for 30 years, and I'm sure Anna same way, and Natasha, we all have, right? And I just find it fascinating to be able to take a document and upload it and get some immediate suggestions on things to pay attention to, but also even, drafting, an improved paragraph, where I always felt, I didn't go to law school, and I always felt, not as qualified as my legal team to draft when I needed to come up with something.
I was going to say, that's a good client. Sometimes you don't Is that a good client? Yeah, because sometimes people are like, I can do this, and they miss a whole bunch of things.
Yes.
So I appreciate your legal.
Yeah, I want to switch to Anna to get her perspective, especially as a recent law school graduate.
Yeah. So, I think a couple of points, right? I think one being that legal, and I'm putting on my legal operations hat now. I've done some legal operations consulting in one of my prior roles. And out of all the areas, I think legal is often the slowest to adopt technology. And they're not necessarily the slowest to procure technology. There's just a resistance oftentimes to using it. And Elisa, I'm sure you've encountered that as well, especially I don't want to use the word older school, but your old school lawyers are like, nope, I do it my way. And I really don't need to use AI, or I really don't need that technology. I don't need that automation. I do fine without it. And I'm used to working, quite frankly, for the last X number of years without it. And so I think one of the biggest barriers to any type of technology implementation is adoption. And you've really got to be able to bring the people along with you and explain to them why they should use it, why it makes it better, cheaper, faster for them. It makes them more efficient at doing their work. They can get more done. They won't quite have the backlog maybe that they have. And so I really do think it's an education and a change management, right, program or change management aspect that's really involved in any type of change, whether it's use of AI, whether it's Google Docs, like you mentioned, instead of Word. I think it really matters to really get back to the basics of like, who are the people that are going to be using it? What are their concerns? How do I alleviate some of those concerns for them?
So Anna, in our recent conversation, we were chatting a bit about responsible use of AI especially in procurement related matters, from the legal side. Can you share some practical examples, tips, something that you kind of like not just learn, but also propagating among your clients?
Yeah. So I know we always hear the buzzwords responsible AI, as well as hallucination, bias. And so these are all things, especially as AI continues to develop more use cases, I think we're going to continue to grapple with for a while until we fully figure that out. But I'm sure we all have an example, right, of using OpenAI, ChatGPT, whatever the tool may be. And we were talking about this the other day, right? You prompt it to do something for you, and you get some sort of erroneous or something that's completely off the wall from what you just prompted it to do. And so I think there's a responsibility for us to fact check and make sure things are valid as we're getting that output from whatever AI tool that we're using. There's really a human intervention element that needs to happen, and you cannot skip that step. It's very, very important. I think another aspect of it that I think is going to really evolve very quickly is the data privacy aspect of AI. I think we all know by now, do not put your sensitive or personal information into AI. You definitely don't want to do that. But also understanding, is it a private instance or a public instance of AI? Do we what information can we withhold, even if it is a private instance? Do we really need to put all of that information in there, or can we kind of substitute some of it and fill it in later? And so I think these are going to be just really, and we've already started to see laws in certain states coming out with different privacy laws around AI, as well as the EU AI Act that's recently come out. And so I think we'll continue to see more of that evolve around data privacy, but definitely think those are just some tips along kind of using AI responsibly, and it still doesn't replace you and your responsibility to validate and double check whatever it is that you're before you just use it. I think that's really important.
I don't know if this is controversial for me to say this, but I guess I believe that it just keeps getting better and better, right? So, whether it's medicine or procurement or legal or engineering and software development, I think we should all expect that over the next 5 to 10 years, the scope and intelligence, the decrease in hallucinations, the security and privacy around my data. Like all of these things have to be addressed for these big companies to make money and justify their stock prices. And they kind of will. Like it's moving so fast. I like what you said, that there's the people thing that has to stay in there. But I see so much of, if you take what I can get out of AI today from a legal advice perspective on a contract, like somebody sent over a partner agreement to me just yesterday, one of my partner leader, and said, hey, take a look at this and tell me what you think. I think it's pretty standard. I'm ready to sign it. I'm so busy. I almost responded back and said, he's a partner expert for 30 years. Just go ahead and that's fine. Move forward and execute it. And instead I uploaded the agreement into, I don't know, I think it was Gemini, or I don't remember which one I used for this one. I'm regularly using almost all of them. And I just said, hey, take a look at this partner agreement. This is the role I play in the partnership. This is the role they play. What do you think about this? What are the risks and concerns? And 30 seconds later, it's identified 3 or 4 real problematic areas in the agreement that I pushed back to him and said, hey, go do something like this. Like this is, in my mind, this is just the beginning in terms of the speed and automation that we can get to places. But yeah, the person behind the relationship, as our functions move from being super technical experts around procurement or legal or code, the human intelligence has to come in here. And I do think it's the relationship piece that's going to be more and more difficult for AI to really adequately understand and represent in what it's doing, right? I just think that's, and where you said it, at least in the beginning, either we're going to come down on the wrong side of AI individually, which means we're going to get left behind, or we're going to come down on the right side of AI, which means we are deeply using it. And now I'm a manager of 100 agents, AI agents that are doing the work of 100 people. The 100 people that decided not to embrace it are the work that the agents are going to be doing alongside me.
Yeah, I mean, Conrad, I couldn't agree with you more. I have used, tools like Claude and ChatGPT for the same thing. Just throw it into the tool, give it a prompt, give it the contours of the relationship, best practices. Tell me what you're thinking. Now, it's my responsibility to read and understand, and I think that's where the human comes in. Because if you don't know what it's telling you, you're not going to be able to sort of analyze or digest if it's something worth raising or not. So I think humans who have that higher level understanding will still be relevant until AI catches up and gets it too. But it can do so much. And that would be the first thing that like an entry level or a first year or like your junior attorney or your contract manager would do. And you can't ignore that reality, because in the time that it took for you and me to upload, ask that prompt and get back an answer, you were able to respond in in minutes probably, right? How often does that happen? Think about it. We've all worked with procurement teams. How often do you put in your request and it's just like, okay, the SLA is, 5 to 7 business days, if you're lucky. And now you've moved it to a day. Like, you can't say that that's not valuable. The other thing, though, is, AI creates network effects. Like, it gets more valuable as it processes more data, as you give it more prompts, as you give it your playbooks, right? As you give it your contours of the relationships, it's going to learn, it's going to adapt, and it's going to start to pick up on that. And again, I'm not trying to be in the world of like humans no more, but we really have to understand what's the possibility and the reality of these tools and apply them. And to Anna's point, yeah, you do that within rules. You do that within constructs. You do that within responsible AI. So you understand what your principles are. You understand, that bias happens, that there's accuracy issues, that you can have hallucinations, and then you figure out how to program and ask questions, monitor around that. But you got to do both. It's not an or, it's an and. Is at the end of the day in my book.
Yeah, I think there are limitations though, right? So you've got, AI is not going to understand like your business strategy or the different concerns from one group to another. And so I think there's really things that are nuanced where AI is not going to be plugged into those phone conversations, those water cooler conversations. And I think that's where, and I think I'm just big on the human element piece staying in there, is because that's so important, right? Is to be able to understand personalities, deal dynamics, what's important to the supplier, what's important to the legal organization versus the procurement organization versus the CFO, right? So those are things that AI is not familiar within your specific organization, to where I think that also needs to be considered as well.
Yes. I'm not paid by any AI provider, but it's going to get there. It's a prompt. You incorporate it in there. I have a little thing in my chat GPT, which is sort of my AI assistant, where you can plug in like, here are the things to know about this organization, and it learns and understands.
It's amazing. It is so amazing, and I think you're right, both of you really. But Elisa, as it gets more intelligent and able to remember more about those relationships or the culture or the boundary conditions and everything else. I know we need to keep moving along through these two topics. So, Natasha, I'm going to ask a question that I think bridges us over there. When I worked with my legal team and we made the biggest breakthroughs in the relationship is when the legal team gave me boundary conditions and fallback language to work more autonomously inside the procurement team. I'm curious, and I thought that was a big breakthrough, and it kind of opens up this other piece. But I'm curious how we should think about these structured boundary conditions and structured fallback conditions, or clauses in the context of new technology. Like, do you think that framework of working together in a trusted way changes as technology shows up? Like, does that I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of a best practice. Does that best practice go away and fall the wayside because some AI agent is now representing that different than how we've done it in the past?
I don't think it goes away. I think that it's sort of a little bit to what I was saying. What are the playbooks? What are the business dynamics? What are their requirements? What are some of the guardrails? I think those are the things that you're going to work on together with your procurement teams, your security teams, with your legal teams, with the business, and so that you can have a construct, a framework for these types of reviews. I think it really only works well when each of you guys are working together to put that in there. If you have it such that, cyber and security, they're going to do their thing. And then, procurement's going to have their thing. And legal's going to have their checklist. And somehow, they're not, rationalized or put together or discussed how it all flows. It's going to be a bit of a mess, which, we've been in any situation where that did happen in real life. It was a bit of a mess to begin with. I don't think AI actually might be able to rationalize it, but I'll put that aside. You want to give the AI tool the best opportunity to kind of replicate that cohesive relationship by working together and making sure that what you're kind of inputting it and what and everyone's standing behind it, so that you're coming up with something that does represent the best in class of what you would do with humans, in my opinion.
Maybe that's the human part.
We pride ourselves at Proc-N-Roll for providing practical tips to procurement professionals. So with everything what we've just discussed, Anna, what would you recommend? What is your practical tip to procurement and legal professionals on how they can start utilizing AI today? Because on average, a procurement manager would have in parallel 5-7 contracts that they are working with, a couple of RFPs, multiple negotiations, risk validations. What is the practical use of AI today?
Yeah, I think AI is awesome for summarizing contracts. Also, or even if it's a prior contract and you're drafting a new contract, kind of comparing, contrasting what clauses are most favorable between the two. I know there's even CLM solutions right now with AI built in that do those types of functions. Formatting can take a long time. I know that sounds very simple, but formatting your contracts, or even like a solid rough outline for a legal matter, right? Like, what are all the things, kind of similar to Conrad's example, what are all the things I should be thinking about for responsible AI, for example? And it be able to give you like a pretty solid outline. And again, it also goes back though to it may not have caught everything. So let me kind of gut check what the output is and make sure, of course. But it gives you like I use AI as like a really good jumping off point. And that's the practical use that I see for it today. That I know that will mature and evolve over time, but that's how I use it, is for just what is a good jumping off point or a good draft. And even for like emails or proposals for that initial draft, I think those are some really solid use cases that I find. And I use AI every day in some capacity. So whether it's Copilot, I've got like Microsoft Copilot now. So it helps with a lot of the, I think, like Microsoft tool solutions, building PowerPoints. It can do all sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of practical uses for it. And I'm excited to see that continue to just evolve and see what it does.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's shift to the relationship, right? So I'll stay with you for now, and then we'll pass the mic to Alyssa. Yeah. You've been on both sides of the table. What do you think are the key components to have productive, efficient, friendly, not competing relationships between procurement and legal? Because on the surface, you think that responsibilities are divided in a very clear format. You own commercial, you own legal. But in reality, it's intertwined. And so from your experience, again, being on both sides, what did you see work well?
So I often hear, I talk to a lot of GCs, a lot of them, and I probably talk to the majority of maybe those that are in the Fortune 500 space. And I think the biggest challenge has been on legal and business alignment. And oftentimes what I've noticed is they have competing priorities, or if you ask them, what do you think the business strategy is? You get a completely different answer when you talk to the CEO, CFO, CPO versus when you talk to the GC. You're going to get two separate, they're not aligned even on the strategy of the company oftentimes. And so I think getting plugged in early and really working together to understand what are our priorities, and what are our risk areas and what is the risk tolerance. I think there's a lot of misalignment. And so it often comes off, and I'm sure in the procurement world, we're very familiar with this, where the perception was legal is the bottleneck. They've had my contract for X number of weeks, right? That's like the famous, I don't know how many times I've heard that. My contract's with legal, they've had it for a long time. I don't know why. And the key is understanding the why. Like, why have they had your contract, right? Almost like that 5 whys. Why have they had your contract for 3 weeks? Is it because there's an uneven distribution of maybe the risk? Or is there a regulatory concern or kind of flag that went up with them and they need to have some more discussions or escalate something? Are the limitation of liability negotiations stalled out somewhere, or is that uneven as well? And so I think working together to understand, and I feel like I have some really good examples of kind of leading practices here of what's worked well for me, but just understanding what the other person needs to make things more efficient, right? And give those things up front. I think a lot of times what the business tends to do, and I've heard this complaint, Elisa, you can probably relate to this. I've heard the complaint of, I didn't hear about that contract, or I didn't hear about that deal until after it was already awarded. They never consulted legal. And so there's some legal hurdles that we need, or risk hurdles that we need to kind of jump over because we were brought in so late. And so I think too, establishing like rules of engagement between the legal department and the procurement department and other areas of the business to understand like when do I need to bring you in, and for what things do I need to bring you in on, and what information do you need from me? And how do you prefer that information be communicated to me? Right. I think those are super important things, is that alignment piece. And then that engagement piece. How do we communicate with each other? What's our communication plan?
What's your experience, Alyssa?
I think Anna's really right. The key is that early alignment, right? And getting big folks on the same page. I mean, to me, it's a team. One of the reason why our collaboration worked well, Natasha, was because we were aligned on what the business goals and objectives were. We both knew what was meant to be achieved, and were driving in the same direction. It wasn't as if Natasha had one thing that she was going for. I was just brought in to, I don't know, look at liability, whatever. And then the business was like in whatever their head was about what they were trying to do. We got together early, and it was a big project. Can't do this with everything, but it was a massive project. But we got together early. Everyone was in the room who needed to be there, know and understand. There were basically shared KPIs, shared objectives, and then you move forward understanding who was going to tackle what component and piece. It's kind of like you move forward as, in concert, in an orchestrated fashion to move it forward. So now the business knows what's going on, the procurement team knows what they're doing, the legal team knows where they fit in. And again, you can't do that for every contract, but you certainly can do the framework, meaning there's really no need to bring in necessary parties to the game late, right? That literally only slows it down. I still am befuddled why that continues to happen to this day. Like it is kind of like a known problem. like you bring them in late, it's gonna slow it down because they are starting from a point, they're starting 5 weeks behind you. How are they not gonna slow it down? Like it's almost like inevitable. So you get that early alignment, you get that understanding, you get people on the same page, and then we're all marching in the same direction, because at the end of the day, we are marching in the same direction. If it's that sales contract, guess what? Legal wants it done just as much as anybody else, because it's revenue to the company. Nobody wants it done in a stupid way, but neither does the business. Like, we're not at odds. We're not at counterpoints, and kind of, if we move away from feeling like we are, then and start to understand one another. So as you were saying, like, understand what the objectives are, understand why certain things matter, because they should matter to the business. I've been talking a lot, but one thing I will say is that at one of my companies, one of the best things that we did was, with the business, we went through some of the standard considerations in contracts, and we got alignment at the executive level that the executives cared about that too. So when it came up in a contract, it wasn't like some team, in the shadows in these illegal or procurement was raising something. It was like, oh yeah, this is what we said we would and wouldn't do. This is what finance signed up for. This is what the CEO signed up for. So I'm not going to pressure you to do something different, because we're all aligned. And I think we need to figure out more ways of getting that kind of like higher level alignment, so that these teams are operating with more clarity on what the business will and won't accept and why.
And who do you think should drive that alignment?
Yeah. I think it starts at the top, right? Because one of the things I said in this last example was there was an executive level understanding of what the company stood for and what the company was trying to achieve in its contracts. If it's ground up is that,
Bottoms up?
Thank you. I think you end up missing it. Meaning, you end up more in those situations where it's just like, well, where'd we come up with that? You guys have heard this before. It's like, who said that we cared about this? Like, who made that up? And it's just like, oh, well, that's what the way so-and-so did it, maybe at their last 3 companies. And so they decided we're going to do it here too. It's like, well, that's not why does that matter to us here? And then you get the wonkiness. So I think it has to start at the top, and they can't get into all the details, but there kind of has to be a high level principle that then gets flowed down to the team so that you know which direction you're marching in.
That is such a beautiful vision of corporate life. I wish that more corporations ran that way, because I just see so many teams that are operating to their own OKRs or their own, like almost in a bubble of we can be successful even if you're not successful, or we're winning and we didn't lose because of me, we lost because of you, or like it's just silly in the end if all of the organizations can reach this alignment about we are here to enable business success and win in business as defined by that. And every one of us are contributing to that. I've worked in some really large organizations that I felt were pretty good at this. And Elisa, the way you've described that, I don't know. I have a hard time imagining that the general counsel is having a conversation with the CEO and the CRO, and they're saying, these are our boundary conditions. This is what we will and won't do. But maybe that's just my naivete. And those conversations do happen more often than not. And that is the framework for why the agreements look the way that they do and why we're sort of trying to juggle some of these things on a deal-to-deal basis.
Yeah, Conrad, I did mention the nirvana. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, why doesn't it happen more? Because people get so frustrated by this dynamic so often. So it is a question to me. It's just like, we get frustrated by the dynamic, but we don't take the time to kind of align people. And that's kind of that's leadership. That can happen in so many areas of leadership, quite honestly, right? Frustration over why isn't A, B, and C or X, Y, and Z happening? And when you take a step back, it's usually communication. It's usually lack of alignment. It's usually people not understanding the objectives and goals. This is just one other area. I think probably the best way, when it happened at one of my other companies, there was sort of a dynamic change in kind of leadership. There was an interest, and I think it was probably pushed by my GC at the time. I was just a young junior attorney. I was actually the one tasked with rationalizing all of the things to present. And I think there was hey, we think we can do this better, understanding. If you can get on board, and that company happened to get on board, do they still do it to this day? I don't know. I sense that they do. I sense that the leadership there saw the value of it. And certainly that leadership team seemed to view legal and the other organizations as partners. And that was one of the healthiest dynamics that I'd ever been in.
Let me just say one thing real quick here. I love this idea of leadership from every level. And I think if the leadership team hasn't done it, that's not an excuse for us at kind of call it a mid-management or mid-leader level to say, look, procurement and legal, and I've lived through that, are not aligned right now. And so I'm going to lock arms with someone like Anna, someone like Elisa and Natasha. We're going to sit down and we're actually going to kind of cut through all this crap, and we're going to get our goals aligned. We're going to get our process aligned. And when that happens, then I suspect, because you're still friends with Natasha, that's how you guys work together, because then it kind of moves from almost transactional to transformational in terms of the operational kind of flow.
That's exactly what our partnership was, because we were not the highest in command, but we were working on a very critical part of the business. And we employed our deepest and greatest creativity. That I remember that even when we asked some of the suppliers, because we negotiated with multiple suppliers, we were developing contractual relationships at that time, not negotiating any. Everything was negotiated already. But we asked them to compare our path and our approach with the best practices. And their response was, you are the best practices. You are designing something that doesn't exist in the industry. And we were 2-3 levels removed from the C-suite at that time. I think we were both at the director level at that time. Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely awesome. Such an important conversation, such an important relationship between legal and procurement. From a practical perspective, right? This AI is coming. Don't be on the wrong side of the equation here. Just like just like Natasha and Elisa just talked about. Be the manager of AI and not the other way around, where you're trying to recover. A lot of cool stuff out there from a technology perspective, both in procurement and legal. But underneath all of that, the relationship really matters. I love the idea of this nirvana where the leadership team at the top level is actually driving the alignment. As we know, that's not always what happens. So take responsibility, figure out who your counterpart is, there is somebody on the other side of the organization, whether it's in legal and procurement or these other teams that we all work so closely with that have this, I believe, that share the same vision of breakthrough. That's really, I think, what, practical leadership means, is to move the organization forward, and we can lead from where we stand. And, as you were talking, Anna and Elisa, about resilience, what strikes me is that it is really proactive. Like, we've got to, sometimes we rush through this legal process and this procurement process, looking at these clauses thinking, what a waste of time. It'll never happen. And then, frankly, and I'm not sure even a lot of the clauses we put in procurement contracts today are really addressing what we're talking about here, like the issues of tariffs, anticipating things like COVID. Of course, we have force majeure and some of that basic stuff, but really focusing our investment and effort on the highest risk, highest impact, most strategic, and investing that extra time that we're kind of automating out of the low end into really anticipating and building resilience into the relationships that we have. Just super awesome. Thank you all for taking time with us today. Anna, Elisa, it's been a massive pleasure. Natasha, thank you for introducing them to the podcast and coming along. We'll have to have you all back. I think we could probably talk for another 2 or 3 hours together. It was really awesome. All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great summer.